Okay, another weekly roundup. Andres, thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here as always, Kaya. Looking forward to the
Okay,
episode today.
as always. Okay, let's jump in. Netlify has acquired Gatsby, which is in a sort of series of acquisitions of sort of open source frameworks, which we'll get to in a minute. But why don't you tell us about this Netlify acquisition?
Yeah, so Netlify, as many will be aware, they're the creators of Jamstack, or well, at least they coined the term Jamstack. And Gatsby is a React-based framework, static site generator, obviously pops in the Jamstack space as well. So Netlify's basically positioned themselves as a platform for modern web development, and they've acquired Gatsby, which include Gatsby Inc. So that includes the advanced cloud platform for web delivery and content orchestration, as well as the open source framework Gatsby. So the goal of this acquisition is to give enterprise developers more flexibility when building composable web experiences with modern web frameworks. And a key thing that it mentioned is that Gatsby is going to remain open source. So composability seems to be the topic and trend that's happening in the industry, from headless to web development. It seems to be the way they want to go. Got a few quotes here from the acquisition. So this is from Matt Billman, CEO of Netlify. He says, the future of the web is composable architectures. The acquisition of Gatsby not only accelerates our product roadmap, but more importantly, allows us to provide developers with increased flexibility and choice in building composable web experiences. We're excited to integrate Gatsby's cloud innovations into the Netlify platform and open up Gatsby's content hub and source plugin ecosystem to the diverse world of modern front-end frameworks like Astro, Next, and Remix. And this quote's from Zach Erlacher. He's the CEO of Gatsby. He says, after years of partnering with Netlify, we're thrilled to join forces. We share a belief in the future of composable architecture, and together we'll better be able to bring our cloud solution to enterprise teams and accelerate the adoption of composable.
So there was some discussion about this on Twitter, namely around a tweet from Stephen Tay, who is a developer advocate of Vercel, if I'm not mistaken. And he just sort of summed up what's been happening recently in this space, right? So recently, Remix Run was acquired by Shopify. Gatsby, of course, acquired by Netlify now, with Next.js being a Vercel company. And you kind of asked the question, we can ask the question. I guess the question came in the comments of like, is this good news? Like these open source frameworks, these projects being acquired by for-profit companies, right? It's kind of an interesting dynamic that's sort of taken over this whole React framework, open source React framework sort of industry, if you will. Yeah. And I think like this is a net positive for everybody. I think Remix and Shopify, Gatsby, Netlify, Next.js, Vercel. I think it's net positive for everybody because it gives, as I'm mentioning, and I noticed some similarities between sort of Netlify's press release comments and quotes and the Shopify one when they acquired Remix, like specifically mentioning that it's, committing that it's going to stay open source, for example, which is again, good. That's what we want to see. But somebody did bring up an interesting counter argument, which is, there's a precedent that when things are not going so well, the open source teams of a large company are the first to get hit with either funding cuts or layoffs, that kind of thing. And the Google layoffs more recently were sort of given as an example there. The open source teams were like the heaviest hit, if you will. So from that perspective, you could say there's maybe a sort of con there to the pros, but I don't think that's necessarily anything unique to this situation. I think when the economy is bad, when things are bad for companies, people are going to get laid off, and that's just reality. And I don't necessarily think that them getting acquired by a large company increases that possibility of the team being cut down, for example. But that's basically the argument. I think it's a net positive. What do you think, Andres?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it is a net positive because if I think about it, any sort of established framework, open source framework out there does have some sort of backing from established companies. Like React themselves, React is pretty much maintained by Meta or Facebook. So I think in the early stages of getting any sort of open source project to wide scale adoption, because that's pretty much the goal of any sort of open source project. It's like, yeah, we want to share with the community, we want everyone to use this, we want everyone to be involved in it. And that takes funding, that takes backing. So these sort of acquisitions, I don't think it's damaging. Like you could say that, like just as you mentioned, the open source aspect of it, it's the first thing is like, okay, we need to put a pause on this. But that's the beauty of open source, isn't it? So like if for some reason this huge company is like, okay, well, we're not really going to be able to support this as it was, the community can then take that on as if they strongly believe in the project.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. I mean, even they could even totally wipe their hands of the project and it still would, be there, right? As long as they don't, close it up at some point. Still, yeah, that's a great point. It's almost like you can't really be impacted too much as long as it remains open source throughout its sort of life cycle. Then it can always just be picked up again by the community, and they can continue where they left off, kind of thing. So yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point, really. Let's move on to our notes here: the composability trend, and specifically Crafter CMS's expansion of their marketplace.
Yeah, so obviously we've been covering composability in different shapes and forms over the last few weeks because it's like the big major trend in the industry. And this is from Crafter's press release. Crafter strengthens digital experience composition capabilities with their expanded marketplace. So we hear that DXC term again. So their marketplace, includes over 60 open source plugins, blueprints, and packaged business capabilities. The new expanded marketplace is a key component that delivers on the promise of what many industry analysts are now calling digital experience composition, which enables business users and content teams to easily compose digital experiences using no-code tools and pre-built best-of-stock integrations and plugins. So it seems to be that in this move towards digital experience composition, composability, it's all about making things easier for business users. And we've got some quotes from Russ Danner. He's the VP of Products and Crafter CMS. So Crafter CMS serves as an ideal headless CMS for a composable digital experience platform strategy. The recent expansion of our marketplace of reusable plugins and integrations enables business users to easily compose digital experiences. Crafter CMS users now get access to over 60 pre-built plugin components that enable them to quickly build and deploy a variety of modern experiences, ranging from personalized enterprise websites, customer-facing mobile apps, OTT video apps, web and smart TVs, all that good omni-channel stuff. And goes on to say, at the heart of composability is the idea that a business user can assemble a solution based on PVCs. This implies that PVCs can communicate and collaborate through loosely coupled means, such as events, and critically, that composing digital experiences from them is a no-code activity. So it should be possible to assemble sophisticated modern solutions that are not predefined or constrained by the PVC's creators.
Yeah, I think this is just Crafter being very astute, very smart, quite frankly. That we're seeing this trend across sort of headless CMSs. Not all of them, but a good handful of them are releasing or have released marketplaces of their own plugins and sort of building their own mini ecosystems, right? And we've spoken about this before on a few different episodes. There's a lot of companies, enterprise companies, who have been using monoliths for a decade or two, and they're now looking at the headless market and thinking, this is the future. As Netlify was saying in their press release, composability is the future. And they're looking and saying, okay, cool, but we kind of need to build everything from scratch, and we need the headless CMS, and we need 17 other technologies to come together in a certain way. And although there's benefit in that, you can build incrementally, you can do that slowly, you can do that exactly how you want it to be, and you can reverse it as well. That's still, for some companies, it looks like a mountain to climb when they've got like a monolith there that, it may be creaking, but at least it's all sort of packaged in there somehow.
Yep.
This is a perfect example of a headless CMS saying, hey, we've actually got 60, PBCs in this case, these sort of packaged business capabilities, which, by the way, I like that. I like that. I'm not usually a huge fan of buzzwords, but packaged business capabilities. I think that talks to people. Yeah, they've got 60 of them. They're open source. They're plugins that can be used. They can be not used if you don't want to use them. And again, we're seeing multiple headless CMSs do this. Craft is doing this in a very, very good way. Their messaging is correct with it. I think this is just good news for Crafter and their customers.
Yeah, and I think we kind of talked about this maybe one or two episodes back, but like having the access to this sort of ecosystem or marketplace, or whatever you want to call it, it's really useful for, of course, the vendors and consumer, the customers, because they can clearly see, okay, cool, we really like this Hella CMS, but what can we put together with it? And then it makes it easier for their partners, their system implementers, everyone that's kind of involved in the rest of that process to say, okay, you already have this fits with what we have here, and boom. So everything's all together.
Exactly. And that's what I mean by crafters being smart here. They're going out and they're building that ecosystem rather than just what some other headless CMSs are doing, which is saying, hey, we've got, the simplest, API for you to sort of build on top of. And for some companies that sounds good. Definitely for developers that sounds exciting. But for large enterprise companies who've got, big web properties or multiple web properties, they want some more stability, some more sort of, they want an ecosystem built out a little bit for them so they can go and start building something without having to venture too far away from that initial vendor, And Craft is obviously recognizing that, and they build it out, and it looks like they're going to keep building that out. So that's interesting to see. We'll be keeping tabs on that. Okay, I think that about wraps us up for the time being. So, Andres, thank you again, and I'll speak to you again next week.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.